Hey Worldbuilders, welcome back to Shoutout Saturday number 20. This is where I read your lore. If you want to see your own lore read aloud here, then come submit something for the daily prompt in the Build Together forums in our Discord server and just tag it as Shoutout Saturday and it'll get read here. And it's getting more and more full, so if you want to see your stuff posted here, you better get started pretty soon. Now let's read some lore. For day 209, the prompt was, what singular thing/creation is core to your world and how does that affect combat? This is from MapleMe, and MapleMe added some extra context for what they meant. In Frank Herbert's Dune series, the personal shield is vital to the setting. The entirety of its tone and how people fight is built on the personal shield and how it affects the world. It allows sci-fi with sword fights. What creation or thing is core to your world and how people fight? Is there any great limiter or enabler that makes your world different from ours? If you have something like magic, how has that changed personal combat? Probin the Great writes, the creation and symptoms of soul steel, an entry in Rust and Blood. According to Oricadian libraries, and the untrustworthy words of their librarians, soul steel was first invented by the Far Empire around 9,000 years ago. Records indicate that the knowledge was granted to them by none other than Nolorad himself. Soul steel was reinvented not long ago in the years of prosperity leading up to Hensman's heresy. The bartering for soul steel was done by Rom, and granted to Hensman before he went crazy to serve as a way to further honor the dead by building immortal buildings with their souls. For a time, this functioned as predicted, with miasma levels reducing drastically throughout all of Remexia as citizens revered the very architecture, the Rom sites. It didn't take long for other uses for soul steel to be found. It started as underground trinket shops, with the alloy forged from the lesser souls of animals and hammered into keepsakes or idols of Rom. Soul steel slowly grew into more and more of a commercial commodity over time, replacing street lamps or car engines, even blades. Eventually, civil war broke out with the apex of Hensman's heresy, where the desperate madman first bound the souls of perfectly healthy people to Gallard Grau MBTs in an effort to keep what little army force he had standing, even as his world crumbled around him. In the first of the years of sovereignty, Remexia began its 80-year-long war with its new neighbor, Castellum. Both countries had the ability to use soul steel, but avoided it for the first 10 years of war. Slowly, however, soul steel became a necessity in the war. As resources became short in supply, every last tank or mech deployed to the battlefield had to last as long as possible. The regenerative properties of soul steel are the only reason the war lasted as long as it did. Without it, every vehicle from smallest car to most gargantuan of tread bastions would only get one chance to be useful before its destruction. With the alloy, however, everything made from soul steel had numerous chances to be used so long as it was recovered. While soul steel isn't foolproof, the simple fact that more effort can be put into individual machines or weapons without as much threat of permanent losses created a new age of warfare where titans could tread the battlefield. Caldatha is the only country in all of Turmoil that doesn't use soul steel on a large scale. The rituals associated with the creation of the arcane alloy are tied closely with religion, which is explicitly forbidden for humanity to practice in Caldathan borders. Raonis Gau, Caldatha's northern neighbor, has no such qualms of putting the lower classes into metal shells. The children of Ragash are able to substitute souls with miasma into soul steel rituals, which has allowed them to bring forth vast numbers of soul steel vehicles, weapons, and armor into the war, with the miasmic energy therein making it impossible for Caldathans or their allies to steal their technology without extreme risk of incurring Ragash's celestial corruption. The simple use of soul steel allows for wars to go on far longer than they should, escalating conflict, escalating misery, escalating turmoil. Very cool. You talked about soul steel a few times, like through it pops up in all of your stuff. Seems like pretty key, pivotal thing that a lot of Rust and Blood revolves around, and I'm glad we got a really, really good look at it here. Nugget writes, Stardust, an entry in The Time Traveler and the Immortal. Stardust is the building block of the world and creation as a whole. It's a material produced by Stella, the goddess of the stars, and can be used to create anything. It's extremely powerful, which is why only trace amounts are in everyday matter. Pure stardust is rather rare. The gods are made out of mostly pure stardust. Their new bodies after death were crafted specifically by Stella to compensate for the large amounts of magic they wield. On top of this, they also have a special organ only the gods have, called a pulvis sac, attached where their hearts should be. It contains and produces pure stardust, which is then pumped through the gods' bodies. This is what allows them to use magic organically and rapidly regenerate if wounded. Combined with their souls being crystallized to avoid overload warping them, the gods are impossible to kill without the magic of a primordial god. The gods can also manipulate reality using the trace amounts of stardust woven into it. Given that everything has stardust in it, the gods' control over their domains is actually control over the matter involved in them. Emrys, the Starchild, has even more minute control over stardust, possessing the same abilities as his mother, who creates the stuff. What he lacks in raw power on account of his weak body, he makes up for in his knowledge and ability to manipulate the world to be his theater. Stardust concept is really fun. I think it's very unique. Super cool take on the difference between deities and regular people, which you've talked about a little bit before, but this gave me a good picture for that, a little bit more accurate of one anyway. For day 210, the prompt was, what is an animal or monster with strange origins in your world? Purple the Great writes, the Void Sons, an entry in Rust and Blood. Monsters come in all shapes and sizes, but Void Sons come in all shapes and sizes. A Void Son is a result of a mortal creature falling to the madness from outside. This is from Built Together 202. The Void Son was first mentioned in Built Together Day 92. A man or creature that has been exposed to the astral truth by the calling will become a floating mote of dark light, ever humming a tune that should never be listened to. The Void Sons only come out at night. Luckily, in the pitch blackness of night, turmoil and anarchy have no suns to reflect light from, so despite having moons, the night times of turmoil and anarchy are completely pitch black, humming their song as they float across the countryside of Remexia. Thus far, only one way has been found to successfully force a Void Son into a retreat, holding the sigil of Ram to the beast and recanting verse 256 of the Book of Ram. And the waves will rip asunder the form of monsters. They will crash down upon the heretic and dispel him from this world. Repeating this verse over and over again yields the greatest results for driving off Void Sons, and the noise you create may help in ignoring the song of the Void Son. The true origins of the Void Sons and that of the madness from outside itself are a complete mystery. Every country thus far has had at least one outbreak of the calling, but only Remexia has let it fester enough to create the Void Sons. Decades have passed, and the number of Void Sons has remained static, indicating that they aren't leaving anytime soon. Laredia writes, strange creature origins. While there are many odd creatures and entities that the people of Laredia must deal with, the one with the most unknown and odd origins is what has been classified as Reviseur's Plague. The Reviseur's Plague itself is speculated to come from the Old World. Some historians also speculate it was a result of the cataclysmic event that ended the Old World. Then religious fanatics believe it is a divine punishment, the plague itself having infected around 1,000 hosts around the world, marching around the world continuously, and if contact is made with another group, they join into the larger group of the two. During the day, the infected will slowly shuffle around in a group. Some will even die in the sunlight, though it seems to mostly slow them all down. With their dead companions, the others will rip them apart and attach the pieces to themselves, or use their new parts to replace their own parts that have started to decay too much. Most parts will go to the horde leader. The moment the sun goes down, the plague will speed up. Watchers. These are the creatures that are simply eyes that will attach legs into the eyes they host, either being fingers, insect legs, or sometimes small animals. These ones are much less of an issue and even kind of help as they don't attack and run ahead of the hordes. Heralds. Normally seen as the leaders of the hordes, very human-looking, as it has been noticed the more human or uninfected parts they attach to themselves, the more normal and smart they will become. The heralds will always have huge smiles on their faces, and they are mostly seen to be capable of the use of magic. Undertakers collect the bodies of things the horde have killed or other dead infected, normally putting them in one spot for the horde to feast later. Normally around 2 of these, one turns into the herald. Juggernauts. Large amalgamations of flesh, most likely failed heralds that used their strength to destroy buildings and many other things. Interesting, okay. The Reviseur's Plague sounds like your interesting take on Laredian zombies, and I like it. I find it's like slightly more fantasy-oriented zombie-sounding things, and it's very, very interesting. But they also have like a hive mind. Maybe I'm getting this wrong a little bit. You'll have to clear things up for me, Laredia, maybe, in the Discord or in the comments. For day 211, the prompt was, describe a business that could only exist in your world. Perwin the Great writes, Pobbies, an entry in Rust and Blood. To arm yourself with weapons, you must first barter for their blueprints. In the early days, individual citizens would barter with Ophiacs on their own, but these efforts were slow and not entirely perfect. Over time, rituals and offerings became more advanced as more and more people began bartering with Ophiacs over time, with some of the best sum circles used to initiate cases becoming so powerful that individual barterers began hiding their sum circle designs from others, seeing profit on the horizon. The POBs, Professional Ophiacs Barterers, or Pobbies, are large workshop guilds that hold monopoly over blueprint bartering. These factions have, over ritual after ritual, created the most optimal summoning circles and offerings for Ophiacs, the Winding Workshop. Pobby facilities often have lower-class employees that are paid very little for their efforts, despite the very apparent risk of repetitive exposure to Ophiacs. While Ophiacs has had millennia to practice hiding its full presence, exposure to it will still cause celestial corruption each second one barters with the Winding Workshop. Employees of Pobbies often end their contract nearly incapable of caring for themselves, with extreme mental and metaphysical damage, leaving them shambling husks wandering the streets, barely capable of asking for food as uncaring civilians do their best to ignore them. There are even extreme cases when Pobbies won't release their employees at all, forcing them to initiate case after case until the celestial corruption completely destroys them, opening a rift into the outside, damning nearly everyone in the building to the uncaring hands of light-stricken. The Oviax, the Winding Workshop, being the source of the blueprints is super interesting, and you've tied it in with a lot of other things in a really solid way, Predwin. I have to say, this whole concept in Rust and Blood is really cohesive and really, really well done. The Pobby's business, I love it. The Wanderer writes, Behemoth trackers. Behemoths are a staple of the far wilds. Their casual pace outreaches the fastest vessel beside wind sails and can house thousands in a protected, warm environment beneath the crimson halo. They'll even lower themselves down when they get to cities without prompt from the humans on its back. In a sense, they're the perfect transportation with one drawback. They wander wherever they seem fit. Every few years, a lot of them will gather around seas and move into a circle. The purpose of this isn't clear, but they take turns drinking water. Additionally, the water makes strange ripples away from their heads. While their reasoning is unknown, this is a beautiful time for traders, merchants, and people wanting to move homes. This is where Behemoth trackers come into play. They live in a network of travelers, some basing themselves on behemoths, others using wind sails to travel the superbly vast plains. Regardless of their specifics, they relay the locations of behemoths to other cities. They keep a nearly live network of information about these colossal beasts' whereabouts so that their arrival is not a surprise to anyone. Not too horribly unlike those who try in predicting weather, if they were to frantically be searching out storm clouds and traveling ahead of them. The main methodology used by trackers is signal mirrors, especially big ones, on the highest points they can. This information is spread via relay. Each tracker will record and send maybe a dozen signals a day, counting the recorded distances and adding them together to make their own report. Bearing in mind not more than 120 behemoths exist, they very well might have made a report about every behemoth with known whereabouts within a week or two. Cool, great little piece of tying some of the behemoth stuff together. I'd love at some point, I need to just construct a prompt that will make you write something like this, which is what a town on the back of a behemoth looks like or something like that. We haven't seen anything like that. Or you could just dump that and share writing if you end up having the time or want to share that or already have that written down. But I want to know more about what's going on the backs of these big boys. For day 212, the prompt was, what is the closest nation/culture to a utopia? And this comes from the Wanderer in the Discord. Laredia writes, Utopia. Tekonoroji is the closest thing to a utopia, known for its peaceful military, beautiful cities, and landscape. It is also seen as the empire of technological and scientific advancements. Its Empress Adari goes out of her way to be sure the country has no enemies and makes sure to stay almost entirely neutral. The capital is known for its jungle-like appearance, having a lot of giant domes that function as greenhouses in the center of each district of the city. Almost all the energy and fuel of the country is green, either wind or water. Being the homeland of the elves, they care a lot about nature and how they affect the land they are on. Growing up in Tekonoroji and even its neighbors, it is required for all children to go through environmental sciences, along with learning how to live off the land. This leads to many being able to be self-sufficient. Hopefully I got the pronunciation of the utopia correct. Tekonoroji, I assumed it was Japanese-inspired. It seemed like it, so I just kind of went with that. Nugget writes, still a better place to live than some, an entry in Petrichor. Petrichor is a singular city, so any dystopia/utopia setup would apply across the map. There are, however, still various districts with various qualities of life, usually dependent on altitude. The higher up in the city you are, the nicer things tend to be. In terms of which is the nicest, my mind would immediately go to the Garden District. It's definitely a rich part of town, but not exactly inhabited by the Second Estate, and is some distance away from major churches. It's fairly clean, low crime rate, with a large garden as its centerpiece and namesake. But with that being said, Petrichor as a whole, at least compared to our reality, is actually rather accepting. There is no homophobia, transphobia, racism, misogyny, and very little ableism in Petrichor. Different sexualities or gender identities are just seen as part of who people are. Women don't face any discrimination either. Even noble titles are passed down by seniority regardless of gender. And when people are unaware of anything outside of the city walls, ethnicities don't mean anything either. Regardless of how anyone looks, they're from Petrichor, so why treat them any differently? Ableism does exist to some extent, but not necessarily from other people. The extreme vertical nature of the city makes it difficult for people to get around if they're not fully ambulatory, something that Lockhart, even if generally bad at his job, is rather vocal about trying to improve. Otherwise, disability isn't something that people see as broken or needing to be fixed. After all, a decent percent of the population, including nobles, is disabled in some way. The main problem with Petrichor in terms of discrimination is class and status. If you have money and are from a respectable family, you get by fine. If you're anything less, you're neglected, ignored, and treated as if you are as worthless as the dirt on the bottom of the Second Estate's shoes. The political climate is inspired by the French Revolution, after all. Petrichor is a city that normalizes depression. Everything is dark and damp, and the gods are eldritch entities encouraging agony with their existence and telling you to be grateful for it. Misery is so common they don't realize there's anything else. This is just how things are. But at least they respect people. Unless you're a plebeian anyway, then they won't like you regardless. Great stuff. Good coverage of the general overall vibe of sort of cultural and societal issues or the lack thereof inside of Petrichor. Nice. Good picture of how that stuff looks. The Wanderer writes, the Great Elven Realm. Deep, deep into the northern wilds of Aratian, into the woods, into hundreds of miles of forest exists the Great Elven Realm. While many elven nations are peaceful, quiet, and happy, few match that of the home realm of the elven king, Anduin. The first being that Malowin breathed life into, and the king of the High Court. His realm has known a near continual peace since the end of the Old World, being settled shortly after. It is a place you will find large open houses with so much greenery, open spaces, trees, and courtyards that even its densest of cities feel more like a large garden. Even smithies have a degree of plants to them, albeit with restrictions to prevent fires. Even their minds have life as they grow bioluminescent flora to lighten the deep places. Aesthetic is not what makes this realm such a wondrous place, however. It is the kindness and hospitality that does so. From the vast and plentiful communal gardens to the king's table, food is found in abundance and shared freely. Even a blind, deaf, invisible, and mute person could find something to eat. Every city and town has a king's table where food of decent quality is given to all without charge. Injuries are not to be afraid of, as nearly every elf has picked up a few ways to treat them in their centuries of life, but even for greater wounds, none outmatch the elven healers in their craft. And while it's true that many hold disdain for the relaxed slowness that elves live their lives, their cities are all the more peaceful for it. None of them are in a rush. When you live forever, you always have time to smell the roses. This results in much kinder streets. Moreover, the elven realms are much safer than that of the shorter-lived races, in part because many of the cities have been inhabited since shortly after the Old World and any local threats dealt with, and because elven governments had stopped sapient-made threats. Elves, especially in the Great Elven Realm, also have a great benefit beyond that of their other counterparts. They house the king of the High Court. Not only does this mean that it has the most powerful standing elvish army, mostly in reserves, but it has, as previously mentioned, Anduin, who holds authority over the entirety of the Fey Courts and the elements of nature itself. There is not a living dragon, a storm, or natural disaster that would dare impede upon his realm without his permission, not only to mention his power and majesty in combat far surpassing even many of the gods. Moreover, he has the youngest daughter Markine living there, skilled in the arcane arts, especially those of winds and great distances. He also has his youngest son, Andwesh, the most eligible elvish bachelor, who, unlike all of his elder siblings, nor his father, has not had children, and thus given a great portion of his soul's power. He is in strength and power, matching many of the great elvish heroes of the old world, and has still yet to reach his potential. So while a great society, it also has more than enough power to support its freedom and defense. Lastly, what makes many elvish nations take in refugees? Few accept the amount that Anduin's realm does. His borders are open to all who seek refuge, and he defends those he takes in fiercely, often riding out to meet the armies or threats that would take them personally. As long as they are willing to abide by the laws of the land, the barest of laws needed to keep a functional society, they are welcome to stay forever. Most first generations do just that, though as time goes on, the shorter-lived races dream of adventure and the busy lives of those who live life on their scale of things. This results in most of these cities often having a significant populace of mortal races, which are welcomed in as if they were elven kin, which ultimately leads to just why this realm and other elven realms go so wonderfully. Wisdom and kindness are seen as some of the most central traits. Skill comes with time, and they have that in abundance. Justice comes with wisdom, and they seek that. And comfort comes with kindness, a trait elves adore. While elves have money, while they have wealth, the essential items to survival are freely given, and gifts are such a common practice that very rarely is an item needed to be bought. Moreover, with the majority of their days left entirely to their whims, elves go into the most strangest hobbies for often centuries. So there's very rarely any judgment of weird actions, because what elf hasn't spent a decade trying to juggle underneath a waterfall? And while yes, interpersonal conflicts arise and are brought out, there are centuries to make up and forgive. And even when that fails, there is certainly a lot of places to go where you'll not see them. In a sense, elves have all the time in the world, except to be cruel, there is never enough time for that. Interesting. All right. Your take on elves is pretty different from my own, and I think it was Predwin also had a similar take, which is that the long life leads to corruption, but I like this more optimistic take of the long life leading to generally very happy, wise, content peoples and them leading wise and content populations. I think that's fun. I love like utopias that are just kind of there to be optimistic reasons to write something nice. Probably the Great writes, where once stood heaven, an entry in rust and blood. We are champions now, valiant warriors that have fought off the greatest horrors known to history. We have denied the touch of the very cause of pain, of suffering, of turmoil. A quote from Gallard Grau, the first, seventh death tongue of Raum. Remexia was once a utopia. Paved roads, free healthcare, food, shelter, and education. Every last citizen had a place to call home, and every child grew up with the support it needed to succeed. Remexia was completely civilized, covered in urban sprawl and massive factories that gave work to all who wanted it. There was happiness unending, and there would be for a long time. It was a heaven right here on Turmoil. The church and the government worked in tandem to unify Remexia's people under one unified front, and it succeeded. Even the old ingrained hate that the citizens had for the other lineages was dull, and a mere second thought as the stories of their betrayal faded alongside the miasma. But in the shadows a great destroyer, the rot fiend, the bulbous, disgusting thing that had wrought destruction on them afore, planned to do it once more. Ragash, the writhing mountain, would make another move to destroy Turmoil, starting with Remexia. The story had been recanted time and time again. Hensman, the last death tongue, went mad. He dragged the sons and daughters of Ram into the pits of hell with him as he corrupted their glorious utopia with wicked words and heinous actions. Ragash itself forced Ram from Hensman, forcing him to do terrible, terrible things. It started slow, diverting supplies one day, a small legal change another, little sins that piled up into a tumor of heresy that turned into a blight upon life. The miasma returned, the undead marched again, and the people of Remexia were told that they simply lacked faith in Ram, that any who didn't pray at least 6 times a day to their savior wished for all of its people to perish. Ragash used the power of the death tongue to siphon away the worship to itself. It took the hopes and prayers from the fearful people of Turmoil to feed its ravenous desire, extermination. We have failed. We have made our Savior angry. Ram hates all of us, every last one of us. I have done my best, but it will never smile upon our cities again. The heretics within our walls have damned us to oblivion, and there is only one thing left to do before we are smote. A quote of Victor Hensman, the last death tongue. Remexia fell apart at the seams. Riots in the hundreds, soldiers marching every night to keep the curfews, and the undead climbing in number every day. Hensman kept preaching and preaching, ushering more death, more pain, more miasma. Cities rotted away. The tallest towers fell upon the masses below. Thousands upon thousands died. Millions upon millions more would follow, if not tomorrow, then the day after that, or the one after that. The miasma boomed forth, reviving the dormant children of Ragash and the great hives of the traitor brood. Remexia's people became blighted with an arcane hate that spread throughout their bloodline, a curse for their folly, to let such a man live for so long after he caused mayhem. Storms of purple rain killed the weak, rifts into the outside drug hundreds away, screaming, and Damon's once more proud Turmoil. Where once stood heaven, now stood hell. Great job on the prose in this one, Fredwin. Really solid writing, and some great evocative imagery. I really enjoy learning a little bit more about the downfall, this Hensman heresy bit of Turmoil, and how things really went to crap. For day 213, the prompt was, what is an example of an extremely dangerous phenomenon in your world, natural or not? And this comes from Predwin the Great in the Discord. From the Great writes, the rust and the blood. In the Rust and Blood universe, I'm sure you can tell. The rust is a corrosive, extra-dimensional fluid that is closely associated with the presence of daemonkind. The blood is a red fog that accompanies the rust, also associated with daemons. It is a blight on both worlds of rust and blood. In Turmoil, the rust and blood is a recent development in the world, a side effect of extreme demonic presence in the material plane from the Great Orc War. The massive influx of occult activity in Turmoil has caused the Hellscreamer, a portal in Hades to Aum, to release massive amounts of the rust and blood in the last 60 years. In Anarchy, the rust and blood has been around for 2,000 years, consuming the world ever since its appearance alongside Maugh. The rust and blood act as a joint force that corrodes through reality, closing the gap between the material plane and Aum every second it expands. The rust and blood essentially functions by teleporting matter into Aum, where it is completely annihilated from existence by the turbulent forces therein. While the rust is completely impossible to protect against, the blood is at least a little less volatile than its liquid counterpart. The blood can be avoided by wearing gas masks or other lung protection, as well as covering skin completely. This requires the use of regenerative materials such as soul steel, but it will also need an as-of-yet undiscovered regenerative rubber or fabric. However, the presence of both the rust and the blood allows daemons to manifest without hosts, creating immensely dangerous environments with nearly invisible daemons the size of golf balls bouncing around looking for prey. Daemon cultists can also be spared from the effects of the rust and blood, as the forces behind the acid seem to be capable of identifying individuals within its area. Daemons are not innately immune to the rust and blood either, seeming to be simply spared as long as they remain useful. It consumes, mortal. It consumes. Okay, so this is kind of cool. I didn't know. Rust and Blood just sounds like a fantastic name for a setting that is as grimdark as yours. I did not realize it had something to do with sort of the underlying metaphysics of some of the stuff that's going wrong. Awesome. Nugget writes, The Eye of a Hurricane, an entry in Petrichor. Edward shuddered and shivered as buckets of water continued to pour over him from above. Neither he nor Thaddeus had any enchanted clothing. By this point, they would probably be drier if they jumped into a lake with their clothes on. They had been on the roof for hours now, waiting for help that was never going to arrive. Hurricanes were somewhat rare, but when they did happen, they were often devastating, a true show of the pain the gods felt being passed unknowingly to the humans they mourn. The worst of the storm was over now, but the rain never stops in Petrichor, and the winds still bit at them. Edward's head rested between his knees as he softly hummed in an attempt to comfort himself. "Get up," Thaddeus said impatiently. "We're leaving." "What?" "No one's coming to help us. No one ever will. Things are better high up. We'll be better on our own. But they won't notice. They're too focused on everyone else." Edward hesitated, looking out into the water so high it nearly reached their feet, even on the rooftops, debris floating down from the flood's path of destruction. "No one cares enough about us to notice we're gone, so come on." Thaddeus held out his hand, and Edward took it, pulling himself up. "Let's go." The two quietly walked away from the crowd of children, many even younger than they were, and taking the attention off of them as they hopped from roof to roof and around a corner. Thaddeus was right. No one noticed they left. They continued making their way through the city, carefully stepping across the wet and slippery stone tiles making up the architecture, trying to not fall off as the wind attempted to knock them over. The water gradually began to lower as they climbed higher towards the cathedral, at least enough for them to be able to wade through in favor of risking falling off a roof. For day 214, the prompt was, "What is an experience or product that is a cultural phenomenon in your world?" Laredia writes, "The Garden of Eden." The Garden of Eden promotional flyer. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Garden of Eden, the #1 place for entertainment of all kinds with the use of technology and blueprints found from the old world along with constant new inventions. The garden is guaranteed to have something you will like. We here at the garden also take advantage of magic to enhance the attractions. This is also how we are able to move our park, using Fey magic and portals to move whenever and wherever we want. The attractions at the garden include and are not limited to the Botanical Garden, the Town Plaza, which is the center hub. This includes hotels, restaurants, clothing, and toy stores, and other things similar to that. The circus, the zoo, with a smaller petting zoo for children as well, aquarium, water park, mini golf courses, art gallery, live performance stages that hold performances from the most famous actors and singers in Laredia, carnival games, and many rides, both large, fast, small, and slow. A large indoor arcade with a bowling alley, and for you adults that come with no children, the Wheel of Fortune Casino, and a small red light district. This costs more. Ticket prices: children are $2, adults are $5, red light is $15, seniors are $3. I hope you all have an amazing time at my beloved garden, Ringmaster Eric's. And there is a Pinterest board that Laredia attached. If anyone wants to look at that, I will link it in the description. For anyone who wants to go and explore that, I have not done so yet. I want to, I just haven't got around to it. I'm excited to look at it. Pro the Great writes, "Rifles in Grilla, an entry in Rust and Blood." Before the age of gunpowder, when men were armed with rocks and stones, did I hear a rock and stone? There was much death. Spears and bows only did so much damage to the ancient innumerable hordes of insects Grilla. Mortals died every day, despite their caution. This all persisted until the first firearm the Far left behind was discovered and reverse-engineered, the Kofesh IC infantry carbine. This discovery started a revolution of Ophiak's rituals and a boom in firearm quality and quantity in Grilla among the Kartoff. The Kartoff came to appreciate these new weapons that put them out of grabbing range and still brought down the average aberrant arthropod with relative ease. The culture surrounding firearms became a kind of reverence and ritual. Rifles replaced traditional blades almost entirely, and the culture around these swords was transferred to their new blades. Rifles, pistols, anti-tank cannons all became integral to the personality between the tribes. The Northgard prophets wield giant anti-tank rifles while riding horses. The Westmakers set rifles down on pillows when they eat. The Wardens keep their pistols cleaner than they keep themselves. Firearms are given more respect than people sometimes, with elders of tribes often granting their seats to the most ancient of guns the tribe has kept operational. Guns are revered because without them, the Kartoff would still die in the dozens just to kill a mere insect. Cool. I love, like, interesting culture surrounding weaponry or warfare in cultures like this that are just completely surrounded and inundated by, like, constant threat. And for the final Shoutout Saturday number 20 day, it is day 215, where the prompt was, similar to Tolkien's Ages, what kind of large dividable eras exist in your world? And this comes from the Wanderer in the Discord. Probably the Great writes, the years before, and now, and then, an entry in Rust and Blood. The eras of turmoil are vague, to say the very least. The modern world is young. Mortal kind has only been walking this world for 2,000 years or so, and their knowledge of what came before is limited. The first age of mortal kind was known as the Years of Emergence and Absolute, the only era to be given such a dignified title. This era lasted 500 or so years before the Years of Dread was officially recognized. This era marks the beginning of the challenges faced by the Kartoff and Seftor, as well as the emergent threat of the miasma within Ormdau. This era lasted a whopping millennium before the next era, the Years of Prosperity. The Years of Prosperity were just as they seem. A balance had been found in turmoil. Cities were built, continents were tamed, and the miasma was a thing of the past. This era lasted all the way until the day that both Caldatha and Castellum declared their sovereignty from Remexia after Hansman's heresy, marking the beginning of the current era, the Years of Sovereignty. Cool, great little breakdown of Rust and Blood's timeline. Nugget writes, The Eras of Time, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. The Primordial Age, from infinity to infinity. The era before existence, spanning from the Big Bang to the death of time. This was where most of the loose crafting of the cosmos happened, including the creation of the sun and moon and the earth and the stars. Humanity was also created during this era, but was only given free will from Chaos's apple tree near the end of it. The era ended when Chaos and Time disappeared and Stella took over as queen. The Experimental Age, 4000 BDW, which is before Divine War, up to 3500 BDW. The Early Ages of the Gods. Stella did much of her experiments with reality during this era, including the creation of the new gods. The 6 major gods were created during this era, although many more minor ones were created later on still. Humans were also doing much of their own experimenting with this new strange concept of free will, using it to create their own ideas of society and invention. The Age of the Old Religion, 3500 BDW to 98 BDW. The Golden Age of the Gods, the world kept in check with their rule and a relationship of love between the gods and the humans who worship them. All is well, all is calm. This era can also get divided up based on real-world eras at the same time, examples of the Bronze Age and the Golden Age, etc. Mentions between two gods rise near the later centuries of the Old Religion as many start to crack under Stella's expectations. Aurelius's reign, from 98 BDW to 0 BDW. An unofficial era following the birth of Aurelius and his early years of immortality. Despite the fact that he was never going to be perfect enough to be a god, he was still around for a few decades, poisoning the minds of god and man alike in his patient rage. Then from 0 BDW to 0 ADW, which is after Divine War, tensions between the gods snap and complete war breaks out. Time stopped being tracked properly. It all takes place in year 0, but in reality no one knows how long the carnage happened. Many gods died and their magic was scattered across the world. The era ended when Aurelius was cursed and left on Earth to die. The Dark Age, from 0 ADW to 400 ADW. Gods and humanity recover from the war. The world is torn apart almost irreparably. Aurelius continues to slander the gods and destroy remaining records, solidifying humanity's hatred for the divine for the rest of time. The Human Age, 400 ADW to the current era. Humans fear and despise the gods, declaring power and independence to themselves. This era carries to the modern day, though can once again be split into real-world ages, medieval period, Renaissance, the Victorian era, etc. Armageddon. Stella holds no power here. Time is dead and I reign free. Welcome to the end of time. Very cool. I like that we're getting a lot of interesting time. This is a great question to ask. I can't believe we hadn't asked this already. It's awesome to be getting so many different of the worlds that we're coming to know, but the actual, what is the history, what is the large, broad, most broad scale breakdown of the history of this place? The Wanderer writes, Endrin's Ages. The Dawn Before Time, where despite the seemingly paradoxical nature, had a significant development done. This is where the War of Creation was fought, a war where failure would be the torturous enslavement of everything to horrors beyond horrors. Creation was not limited to any arbitrary rules like time, energy, or conservation of mass. The only limit was that of thought itself, being such as the world weavers would battle with tales of epic proportions. That is, until the elder gods, the greatest of beings, formed and organized reality into a world of cause and effect. The old world was born as reality was organized, but there was a short time where everything prospered until Talia, the daughter of flowers, was murdered. In a sense, she was the embodiment of the innocence of the newly formed world. The elder gods went to war, Kirth to avenge his niece, and the world for allowing such a thing to occur. Belivor led the defense, for while he grieved his daughter deeply, he would not insult her with cruelty nor abandon her dying wish. The elder gods went to war, and not a single atom of creation did not feel the tide of war. But when finally settled, when the colossal war finally ended, it knew peace and rebuilding. Slowly, after securing peace, the Elder God stepped down and passed it to the Elder Titans. The Elder Titans held power for no longer than any pantheon in Endrin had or would, but eventually they waged war and slew each other. The Elder Titans held power for longer than any pantheon in Endrin had or would, but eventually they waged war and slew each other. The survivors either rebuilding the shattered world or moving into deep slumbers. This led to the Age of the Fae, where they ruled and danced across the world, for they saw the potential beauty in the potential of a world reborn. They ruled by authority and fairly, though the fledgling races on the cusp of their new existence began to find their laws and their truths, so they coerced a prince to slay the High Queen, Toriana. With the High Queen of the Fae murdered, Anduin, the King of the Elves, High King, though not married in any way to Toriana, severed the land of the Fae and the other planes forever, seeing that the new races had created lies. This led the opening to the next era, the reign of the Tavism Pantheon, holding their origins from Kirith that they were cruel, powerful, and held little regard for kindness and mercy. Any crimes the little races had done were quickly atoned for 100-fold. Even the elder gods feared to intervene, as the Black King held the power to steal the strength and abilities of others. But in turn, all of their dynasty fell to their own ambitions and their inability to set aside their own pride and ambition, so they lost. Next came the Titans era. Many of the children and grandchildren of the Elder Titans began to pick up the broken worlds and seeing immersion of tiny civilizations. Many of the Titans, and a few Elder Titans who aided, built refuges for them while others destroyed and slew the tiny sapient things. This went until Anuriel, the Elder God, battled them and sealed them into their accursed little box to reminisce of their crimes. In the end, they slowly died out, and those that remained raised the next generation of gods. The new fledgling gods, named the Starlit, Doomsfolk, and Abyssal, took hold as a splintered pantheon. Those who wished peace and kindness took to the Starlit, those who wanted power and were cruel became Abyssal, and those in between the Doomsfolk. This is the first age where the elves let the new young races take root. They gave the vast majority of the world to the new races, who they taught in all manners how to survive and thrive. Then, in their exhaustion and weariness, retreated into their realms to rest. Early on, the three factions fought, but the leader of the Starlit banished the Abyssal out of the main mortal planes, creating the chance for all to thrive, though not without conflict. When the Abyssal broke free, that same leader sacrificed herself and made way for a new realm, the Post-Doom realm. The children of the Starlit and Doomsfolk took hold and allowed a new era of peace and prosperity without threats from beyond destroying everything. There was now a shield against all of the horrors of past ages. Technology advanced, and fairly soon worlds such as Earth took hold, having technology enough to make many themes of magic obsolete. Soon they entered the space age, traversing the stars themselves and beyond. Nearly as many civilizations were among the stars as weren't, and shortly after, they all were. And as the last of the gods dwindled or slumbered, then came the godless age. They had not a pantheon to guide them, and for a while they had great success. But like all ages, they fought, waged war, and nearly destroyed themselves. This led to the Great Fall, where the wonders of space were nearly all forgotten in their advanced ruins. This began the dwindling of creation. The sources of energy were sealed, and creation was then a system closed into itself. This was met with the slow, impossible, gradual fading of the stars. Slowly the great old bones of creation started to rest. New worlds stopped being formed, and bastions against the fading light were formed, dwindling into near nothingness until the final battle for creation was fought. The eldest of gods awoke from their slumbers and began one final battle. Long dormant civilizations awoke. Kirith escaped from his prison and waged one final war. And in the end, after it was all over and no one was left, at Malawin's behest, Belivor opened the Gate of Midnight and allowed creation to end, and for the next story to be born. Nice. I always love it when people have almost a Norse-like concept of here's the ages before as well as the ages not yet past. At least I'm assuming that's what you're doing. And you sort of have the apocalyptic eschatological scenario for your setting already planned out, or at least what the people believe will occur. Very cool. Very well done. Well, there you have it. That is everything for Shoutout Saturday number 20. This was, again, a very long one. I think we're close to 7,000, maybe 8,000 words on this. I did not count words and images yet. And there was actually one from Nugget that I'm going to put on the next one because it was posted a little bit later than normal. And so even more words are written this week than is represented here just on the image and what has been read. And so thanks a bunch, as always, to all of our submitters. Thank you to you for watching. If you would like to help out the channel or the community, or you're interested in seeing more, then please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, all of those things. It means a lot, and these will just keep coming out. If you want to see your own stuff, like I've talked about before, come to the Discord, submit something in the Build Together forum for the daily prompt, and tag it as Shoutout Saturday, and I'll read it here. If you supply images, I'll show the images off as well, like I do as always. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful Saturday, or whatever day it is that you're watching this. Goodbye.